Yeah, my computer that I normally do this on died last night, and it required the bit locker thingamajig, and I plugged that in, followed all the directions, and it's still dead. And I can't find anybody to look at it until Friday at 6:20. And just I want to scream. I love technology when it works right and when I can understand it. But I was telling Tanis earlier that I had my desktop set up with a um, a new webcam and speakers and microphone, and everything seemed like it's okay. But whenever I try to open up Teams, everything shuts off and nothing works. And I have no idea why. So I'm going to have to find a 12-year-old in the neighborhood who can fix my computer system. Sigh. Oh well. First world problems. All right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll just talk with that. So, how have you guys been doing with everything?
Been really tricky keeping up, but I've managed to do it somehow.
Well, there's, some people, I can understand that some people would get a little bit annoyed that I didn't tell them how many pieces to do on the um, collage, but I wanted to show everybody this really quick here. I did update this a bit, but notice on each of these modules, it gives like a suggested time. And that's why over the years, people who get A's, that's what they do. So, prep and planning. And then down here, when we get to the tiles, and I've not edited this at all, it says creation of your pieces, 9 to 10 hours. That works out to 45 minutes a tile. And 45 minutes a tile is not 3 pieces. So, just, or 3 pieces. What's been really nice is that a lot of people have really put energy into making these very cool. And I appreciate that. And sometimes it is kind of difficult when if this is the kind of texture that you want to do, that's one thing. What you're not seeing is that this person actually sewed this texture, they wove it and sewed it. And but if you're doing this and you didn't spend 45 minutes on each tile, then I'd recommend revisiting it before turning it in. I have I did grade everything Monday. Everything was graded, and so I have to go back and rework on stuff. And I wanted to go through what people have turned. And one thing that I did notice is that um, there's been several people where we do this weekly thing where we look at them and stuff like that, and we talk about them, and they've gone back and we work stuff. And I think the prize right now goes to somebody who worked on structure and skin. They did have done structure and skin. They've redone it like 4 times so far because each time they did it, they would get a little bit better, a little bit closer. And this last time, they nailed it on the head. Did a really great job. Very, very impressive. And so I really appreciate that. When we're not in a live class and we have to do this back and forth, the only way we can get it to work is if I make it so you guys can keep doing that up to the end of the semester. On an online class, we don't have the luxury and the blessing of seeing each other in person. So I don't know if either of you have taken advantage of that, but I do know that several people in the class have taken advantage of it, and their work has really shown a dramatic improvement because of that. So please remember that uh, when we when you don't get all the points you want, look at what I say, and you can always talk to me, and I'm happy to work through it with you. One person did suggest, I'm, oh, I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button. One person did suggest that I edit these photos to only include the good examples. And I think that that's a really good idea. I will take the ones from this class. I've been emailing people who give me really good examples. And what I'll do is I'll take bad examples from this and show them as bad examples. And I will do good examples from the class this semester so that next semester when people see this, they'll see what the good examples look like. People followed the directions and did a really good job compared to what is just really not that good. And it's from my perspective, the vast majority of students at UVU, you guys all have jobs, you guys all do stuff professionally, and it is a surprise when somebody, when the assignment calls for 45 minutes per tile and they produce something that is rather disappointing. That is really a rarity, and many times it's because uh, they didn't understand the directions, not because they're lazy. Because UVU students, you cannot be lazy when you have a family, when you have a job, when you have all these other things, doing classes on top of all that. It's laziness is not the issue. It's just not understanding the directions, I think. And so I did go through, I highlighted some stuff, and I clarified some things. So for the colors, I wrote in of 9 pieces for each collage. And then I highlighted things like draw from your experience as professionals and about 3.5 to 5 hours. This is the time spent on these tiles for the colors, and again, up here, we look at the creation of your pieces, 9 to 10 hours for all 12 tiles. And that's, 6 for the texture and 6 for the color. And I think I'm gonna work on this too over Thanksgiving break and see if I can clarify it for next semester as well. But I did want to show you guys uh, examples of what people have turned in, and I thought that that would be good. And we're just going to talk about some of them. And again, I'm I'm talking about them from the perspective of what should be changed. I'm not attacking anybody. I'm just saying should be changed. So, okay, you guys ready? Let's see. And like on this one, I think the textures are really interesting. This is an interesting texture set. For the colors, this is one of those ones where some more time needs to be spent on the collage. Oh, you guys can't see it, can you? Hold on a sec. Let me. All right. So on the texture, I think I like this one particularly. Is really interesting in the pull tabs. This there's not an awful lot going on, and the reason why we're doing the collage is that you can really spend the 45 minutes and play with the ideas of the colors and things like that. So I'm going to get to the next one and show that to you. Okay, let's see if we can do this. I'm enjoying this, even though there's only 2 colors on this, which is totally fine. I like the fact that the person used. Oh, you can't see that. I hit the wrong button again. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm liking I'm liking this kind of a thing. I think that's really interesting. And then using several different colors to show a gradient is very interesting. And I like what the person did with the textures. Well, they didn't spray paint it all the same color, but they used white and kind of did a draw. It looks almost like a dry brush on top with the white. And I think that that really helped to emphasize the textures. I think that that is a real fun look. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay. Like this is really kind of a fun one, the red. And there's lots and lots of little pieces here. Then we have the blue and the green. And then we have this up here too, the blue and yellow. And I one of the reasons why I said say three different color schemes and then two different color combos for each of the three color schemes is just that I want people to play around with the different colors. And I'm appreciating that. And again, this I think the physical texture is really emphasized with kind of brushing the surface with the white. I think that's really interesting. I'm sorry for the delays on some of this. I'm using my wife's Mac, which I'm not that familiar with. So it's a little bit of a struggle for me. This is really kind of an interesting thing. One of the things that I enjoy is that you can kind of tell whoever the artist is that's making something, you can kind of tell where they get a lot of their inspiration from. Like this looks to me very op art and pop art, and it's kind of fun to see that. And I love this where everything is spray painted the dark black, and so you really have to pay attention to see the texture. That's kind of fun. Now, and this one, I wonder if that's the same. I hope it's not. It might be a little bit different. I'll have to double check, but stuff like this is really kind of neat. This kind of reminds me of Mondrian a little bit, but it also looks like that kind of op art, pop art type stuff. That's really fun to see. This is kind of an interesting one. I like this juxtaposition with the bricks laid on top, kind of the brick shapes, and then you also have the cutouts right here. That's really kind of interesting. And I like the bright colors and shapes. What's really fun to see too is when people use the collage type stuff to paint with, or it feels like it's painting. Finding shades of colors. There's some interesting shapes going on here, just doing some different things. Sometimes the textures are really fascinating. Like that's something that's kind of interesting. This almost, I know it's not that, it's something else. It almost looks like a mistletoe style leaf, but this makes me think of um, like seaweed almost, or pepitas, something very interesting. And I like it when you guys play with stuff like that. It's kind of fun when you can't really tell exactly what the thing is. You can't identify it. That's always interesting. The kind of kind of a fanned out weaving. I really like seeing this kind of thing where you cut the little shapes, kind of blend them into each other to get the color spread. That's really fascinating. And one of the reasons why we do the um, collage is just like with glass, it's impossible to blend the colors. You cannot blend the colors. And that it becomes really interesting because you're working with some restrictions and trying to figure out ways to get people, viewers' eyes convinced that they're seeing the colors. This is very neat. I like the fact that they're doing this mosaic color blend with squares right here and triangles right here, doing some really interesting things. I love these kinds of textures. This makes me think of like Louise Nevelson and stuff. It's just very interesting kind of stuff going on. This is kind of a fun way to spread with the shades of purple too. I like that. The different rocks and looks like almost in chunks of industrial packaging or something right up there. It's just very interesting to me. Now, I want to, after we talk about these, we're going to talk about the paper mache a little bit. And then I want to talk about the, oh, this is an interesting one. I want to talk about the conceptual art quite a bit. And everybody's there's a video that I really need you to watch and pay attention to. This is kind of fun. It almost looks like clothing right here. You know, I'm trying to blow it up a little bit, not having much success. Okay, there we go. Yeah, this looks almost like doll clothing right there. That's kind of an interesting thing. These are kind of cool, these kind of patterns that they use to make with the color. I like these kind of leaves, bringing the leaves in and stuff. It's really fascinating to me when you guys take the time to like almost make a some sort of an image with the leaves. Maybe not something that people would recognize, but you're taking the time to do something. These are really very cool collages. I really like the kind of playing with the color scheme and finding photos from magazines and stuff like that and putting it on. This person did put a lot of energy into it, and I think they did a great job. And these texture, this kind of thing, we've seen this kind of spongy wood kind of stuff in um, for home decor kind of things, and seeing it in this kind of a context is really weird. Or spray painting pistachio shells so that they become really super glossy, kind of transforms it into something that we're not quite comfortable with. And this, I don't know if you guys saw did you guys ever see the Body Worlds exhibit? Any of them when they came to Salt Lake? The guy was taking corpses and replacing materials and tissues with plastic, and that like filling up the
Go,
vein.
but I remember that.
Oh, okay, you remember that? That's what this texture reminds me of. I think that so it's really fascinating visually, but makes me very uncomfortable. a lot of really interesting stuff going on. And I like the fact that with these collages, they added a little bit of extra things to make it just a touch dimensional. And this with the, I don't know if these are, they almost look like buttons or something right there. And that is really interesting, having different sizes and everything. And it almost looks like pencil shavings, but it might be ribbons. I'm kind of liking, again, using the leaves almost to make a picture and overlapping. That looks really interesting, these green leaves. And then this is kind of a fun passage working with those different elements from the magazine. This one is really fun. I like this kind of, again, it reminds me of op art, going through making those designs. And this just, I'm a quilter. And so I find myself kind of responding to these kind of things. And this is really an interesting take on those color schemes. Then over here for the textures, this is a lot of fun seeing that and these woven structures and things. This is really kind of an interesting one. I like that where you have the purple back, you have the dark background and the light on top, because if you look at it long enough, after a while, it almost feels like the purple is in front of the yellow, and then it starts switching back and forth. That's really interesting. Those designs are interesting. And I like the different kinds of textures on this, on this cube. I like this kind of texture where it was, these cube faces are each 4 inches, and this person made these 3-inch strips to stick out almost straight out. That was kind of interesting. And doing overlapping and just playing with lots of different kinds of stuff. I like seeing that. Really interesting textures with the cardboard. That's very interesting. Picasso and Brock really enjoyed working with different textures, kind of like this, making collage style paintings that were very interesting. Look at his early sandpaper guitar, and Picasso did something like that. And then Brock would do faces, do portraits of people. Very interesting. All right. So I believe both of you guys already did the cubes, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. There's a few people that still need to do that. And just remember to put in time for it. And sometimes it can help to design all the colors first and play with that while you're watching TV, and then do all the textures, and just make all the tiles and then put them together in cubes. And this is something that may take a couple days to do, and that's absolutely fine. Okay, now the next thing I wanted to talk about was, I wanted to go over the quiz a bit, really quick. Have you guys both taken the quiz?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to just talk about the quiz really fast, paying attention to time, and then we're going to look at paper mache, and then we're going to look at the conceptual art stuff. So let's see. Because the conceptual art becomes an issue for some people. They find it very difficult to understand what it's about. But I try to do it. You have a couple of things to do where the work itself is not really egregious. It's just the thinking part of the process can become a little bit of a challenge. Now, both of you guys are you both of you 2D painters and designers?
Yes, for the most part.
Yeah.
Okay, because then this kind of thing is not going to be that difficult. What I find that the people that have the biggest problem with this quiz are usually the 3D artists, which I think is interesting because this is a 3D class. But as we go through, these are terms that painters, designers, most people like that are going to be really comfortable with. And you just talk about each of them. So I would like to go back and forth if it's okay with you, Tanis and Kim. One of you take simultaneous contrast, the other one take value, then hue, then go back and forth like that. Who wants to explain what simultaneous contrast is?
Take simultaneous contrast.
What's that?
I can do simultaneous contrast,
Okay.
I think.
All right, great.
It's where like a color looks different depending on what other colors it's by. Is that
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay.
It's it's emphasized by itself and its contrast is emphasized as well. Like chessboards are a really good example of simultaneous contrast. Most of the op art play in the early 60s plays on the ideas of simultaneous contrast. So yeah, you're exactly right. So Tanis, you want to take value?
Yeah, I meant to take contrast, but I forgot to unmute, so that was on me.
I'm sure whatever you said was amazing.
Well, value is just the lightness or darkness of a color. It doesn't have to be centered on one color. It's just any color and how light or dark it is.
Excellent. Very good. Right, Kim, you want to take hue?
Base color of the
Yeah,
color, you know. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like ecru or green. Yes, very good. And back to Tanis. You want to talk about saturation for just a sec?
Yeah, saturation is the brightness of a color, which can be a little confusing because sometimes when I think brightness, I think of uh value,
Right.
because lightness and darkness and brightness are pretty easy to mix up.
Yeah. And it can be a little bit confusing sometimes. Saturation, I'm thinking primarily if you add other colors to mute it, that's where the saturation comes to effect. If you're lightening and darkening it with like white, then that becomes a value issue. But yeah, very much. Good. With cool colors, back to Kim.
Of the color wheel. Like blues and purples and greens are the cool
Okay.
colors.
Yeah, exactly. And they're generally referred to as cool colors because of the air or the water. When it gets in between things in our eyes, has a tendency to turn things bluish. And so that's what it, and then also the association when the weather turns cold and you don't have enough clothing, your lips kind of change color. But yeah, very good. Excellent. Back to Tanis. You want to talk about subtractive color mixing. And this one was confusing to me at the beginning.
Yeah, this one was really confusing to me too, because I kept reading over it and I was still trying to really wrap my head around it. But it's when you mix pigments together, and the general way you could describe it is you mix the pigments together and they make a darker color. But the way the text talks about it is there's like subtracted energy that comes from reflected light in the mixture, which is what makes the darker color or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly right. And the distinction comes because of experiments with light, invisible light, starting with the guy who had an apple fall on his head. It was an alchemist and a scientist. Newton, Isaac Newton. Because when he started looking at light, he was one of the first ones to realize that when you add colors of light, it makes the light brighter and closer to white. But if you're using pigments, every additional pigment it blocks out what other colors there are. And so when you mix all of the spectra of light together, you get white, pure light. And when you mix all the pigments together, you get black or dark because no light is escaping. And that's so the subtractive is directly describing the energized electrons that are bouncing off the pigment, which I think is interesting because then it makes sense that they would call it subtractive. But I think they do that just to see if they call it subtractive primarily to see if you're paying attention to the reading. And I like this. Originally, I had written this in one sentence. Please tell me who or what Roy G. Biv is and how old he is. How long has he been around? And of course, Roy G. Biv, the seven colors of the rainbow, and Isaac Newton was the one that articulated this specifically because he was an alchemist, and seven is a significant number in alchemy and uh, mystic geometry. So it could have been any number. It could have been six. That would make a little bit more sense because indigo is right in between blue and violet. But I just think that's interesting that Isaac Newton picked seven because he was an alchemist. And of course, Roy G. Biv has been around since the universe was formed, after the Big Bang, because it's an expression of radiation. With the Readymades, who was surprised at this reading in the um, textbook?
I'm still working through the textbook right now. I'm just
Okay.
really behind in some of my classes, so
Well, don't worry about
I would need to go back and
that.
reread
Okay.
the
The
chapters to remember for sure.
Marcel Duchamp was a friend of Picasso and Braque, and they all three invented or discovered Cubism together. That was started about 1906, I think, was the first Cubist painting. And of course, Marcel Duchamp's famous Nude Descending a Staircase. And he even gave an interview where he had a time lapse photographer. Well, no, it wasn't time lapse photography. It was in camera photography where they took several shots of him walking down a staircase and showed, and put it all in the same frame. So it showed his body at different points going down the stairs all at once. But one of the things that he did was one day he was walking by an apartment that was being renovated, went in, found out that they were replacing the urinals, grabbed a urinal and put it on its back, wrote our mutt on it, and then put it into a show the next day and titled it The Fountain. What he was responding to is for about 60 years, the French gallery system were was telling people, curators were telling people, this is what is considered beautiful this season. This is what an intelligent person likes having in their home this season. These are the colors that are correct art. And the subject matter, for the next 6 months, um, God wants everybody to have meadows in their living room. kind of thing. And Marcel, with Braque and Picasso, were all so irritated that art was being separated from the enjoyment and participation of regular folks by the people that were running these salons and the gallerists. And it made him so mad that he wanted to do something to force people to start thinking again. Because that was one of the real big hallmarks of Impressionism and Cubism, is that the artists expected you as the viewer to be smart. And the Cubists particularly depended on you as a smart viewer to help them generate meaning, appreciation, and understanding of the material in the painting. They require their viewers to express themselves, to put themselves into what they were seeing as well. And part of this process, Marcel Duchamp realized that the only thing he could do, or one of the main things he could do, was create an environment where viewers would be engaged by requiring them to question, what is art? What does art mean? Who gave me permission to decide on what art is? And why did I give my permission to decide what it is to somebody else? And that was the birth of the ready-made. He was taking objects, and he said he only did about, I want to say like 13 of these through his life. And the first ones were pretty simple, he said, but later on it became increasingly more difficult. He was just trying to find things that had absolutely no emotional connection, place them, give them a new context, give them a new title, and force people to engage with them as an idea outside of the object or the thing itself. And I love that. So, when you see a urinal and labeled it a fountain and it's on a pedestal, you start asking yourself questions like, is this art because it's on a pedestal? Is it art because it's in an exhibit? Or is it not art at all? And my thoughts on this, I've had students get really angry at me about this. My thought is that this is both art and non-art. And let me show you a picture of the fountain. And you'll see what I'm saying. So we're looking at this, and you can see on one of these, he signed it. I'm going to blow this up a bit. There we go. Here's the top. Here's where it bolts into the wall. Plumbing's on the other side. And of course, if it was plumbed, the water jets would squirt out this way. So it would kind of squirt up like a fountain. And he wrote Armut. And it was just a name that he invented that he said was incredibly unassuming. And one of the big reasons he picked that mutt is because what is a mutt? It's not a purebred. The parents met accidentally, basically. And he felt that art as a commodity was becoming so rarefied that ordinary people who should be enjoying art could no longer even feel like they had a place at the table. And so that's why he did all this that he did. And I think it is, when you look at this and you're told this is art, what are two of the first things you start thinking about? I think one of them is the knee-jerk reaction, are you kidding me? And then the second reaction, when you take a moment to think about it, is what about this transforms this into art? How is this presented as art? What does that mean? And so that conversation about ready-mades, I really appreciate that, because it also gives permission for people to start finding cool objects and using them in their artwork because of the shape or the connotations of the object. I think that's really fascinating. And this leads us to what are found materials. Found materials are things like what you've been using in these texture and color collages. Stuff that you find in magazines or paint stores, stuff that you find on the ground while you're going out walking or behind the couch. These are found materials. And when you take a leaf and split it down the middle and then attach it to something in layers so it starts looking like scales, it completely transforms the thing. One of the coolest things, a few years ago, I was invited to be part of a um, grant committee in Indianapolis. This was right before COVID. While I was there was an artist who would do portraits where he would find old LPs of music that he associated with the person he was doing a portrait of. He'd shatter them, and then he'd make this kind of textural thing, so it looked like a portrait. It was all the color of the LP, but it would feel texturally like it would look texturally like a portrait of that person. Well, you'd have sharp bits for the hair, you'd have long things for this. The different textures made you feel um, getting a feeling for the portrait of the person. And I thought it was fascinating because you look really close and the shards are dangerous. You back off about 3 or 4 feet and look at the piece as a whole. And these things were about 4 feet wide and 6 feet tall. It starts transforming not just your relationship with the material and the found object, which was these LPs, but it really makes you think about what the artist was doing with their portraiture. I thought it was fascinating. I use found objects a lot in my work just because I love. Um, I have a friend who's an antiques dealer in Provo, and I don't know if you've ever been to Cat's Cradle Antiques, but I love going there and using stuff from his shop because when you see objects that other people have loved and cared for and handled for decades, they're filled with what I like to call happy ghosts. They have all these connotations of memories where whether or not you share the memory, you know that there are memories attached to it, and it gives it a different weight. I think that that's fascinating. A big good way to resolve this one, question number 5. These are the possibilities, and you just figure. And there's only 7 of these, and I think 8 possibilities. So there's going to be one that you don't use, but just go through and use them one at a time. I think the biggest time when people lose a point is when they misspell something, and the second biggest is when they double use a word. So it's one of those 8 words. And then here, applied and natural colors. Just think about what they are, because this is definitely applied. But I'm pretty sure this is going to be natural because the person, yeah, they use the leaves, but the leaves are already there. So maybe. So think about that. Betty Czar is one of my favorite artists in the whole wide world. She is the lady that I would want to be as my grandma if I ever got a vote. But she will do things because she feels that they need to be done, not because she's trying to make a statement. So look up her, but it's just fascinating stuff. Both these guys worked with found materials, but John Chamberlain, he was really interested with how it looks texturally and the colors. He didn't want any meaning associated with that. Not what he was interested. He was interested in the formal relationships. While Betty Saar, she saw the relations and felt the connotations, felt those ghosts, and that's why she put things together the way she did. Some of her stuff is more powerful than others, but I recommend looking at her stuff. It's just amazing. And I really love what Fran Crow does. This is always tongue in cheek, because she'll put these little packets together, and it's all marine waste, garbage she finds on the beach, and she'll put them in these super chintzy tourist bags, and I think they sell for like $3.50 a piece or $4.50 a piece. Just you could be a bag of waste to take home from a beach you visited, and I love this. And I think one of the things I love about this is that it's tongue in cheek. There's a certain dark sense of humor to it. And when she does this, you're participating in the cleanup process just as a tourist, and you don't even know it. It is a serious issue, but she approaches it in a way that is not preaching to you. And it's actually can be kind of funny. And I just think it's great. And this, we know about color. We know there's psychological impacts of color. And what's interesting is that color is going to be different from culture to culture and situation to situation. And even the shades of color are going to be different. You know, how much different would this be if this was a very pale blue? You know, and that, or if this was shades of pastel. And I just think that that's really interesting. So think about that. And when you write it, respond to that. Okay, so we're going to talk briefly about the paper mache. I didn't go through that quiz too fast, did I?
No, that was great.
Okay. Because you guys are going to go through, you're going to use the text, and if you need to, you can do it several times. Now, I know I showed you this image. We blew it up and went in really close. So you can kind of, and I wanted to do that so you kind of see the sanding and how the person made this stuff. Excuse me. And I did make a video. It's not on this. But what I wanted to do with this is sorry about that. I'm sure you heard that. But I want to show this is the paper mache website, our YouTube channel that I want to show you. And what I like about this is Dan is a sculptor who uses paper mache. And a lot of people dismissed his work at the beginning because they thought it was such a child's material. But what he does is amazing. And I would spend a couple minutes just looking at that website or that YouTube channel because he does some really fascinating stuff that I don't think you're going to expect when you're thinking of paper mache. And then this is I believe this is his website where he talks gourmet paper mache, where he shows some of the techniques that he does and stuff. And yeah, you can say, "Oh, this is chintzy," but it's no different than the way that he treats it. It is no different than somebody carving in stone or wood, because or welding, because he uses it as a sculptural medium. And I also love his work because he plays around a lot with colorizing the material, and I think it's really fascinating. But he chose paper mache specifically, or one of the reasons he chose paper mache is because he loved how it felt to work with, but he also uses it specifically because it's a medium that feels approachable. You know, ordinary folks, when they see like burnished steel or bronze, it can be intimidating, or large oil paintings. And Dan, when he does his paper mache, people know that it's paper mache, and for whatever reason, they give themselves permission to approach it. And I give a demonstration about this, and I'm so this is me wearing a short sleeve shirt, and I'm giving a demonstration on the carving. And then, yeah, I couldn't position the thing so you don't really see what's going on, which is kind of aggravating. And then this is where I'm showing the paper mache. So it's about mile marker 56, 57, right around there is when I talk about the paper mache. And I demonstrate how to mix it, how to tear the stuff. So it really starts, let's see, right around 54. So mile marker 54 in the video is what you need to get to. And then I demonstrate how to use the paper mache. So we're going to watch this without the sound for just a couple minutes. So I'm showing you how to mix it and everything. And this is where I tell you that it's a good idea to wear gloves, because I did not wear gloves while I did this. For the next 2 days, I was pulling the hair off the back of my hands and my fingers. That is aggravating because the glue gets right in there. Very irritating. So after mixing it a bit, I demonstrate tearing the paper and everything. If you tear it with the grain, you'll get long strips. If you tear it against the grain, you're going to get really short things. And this, I'm dipping the paper in. I'm kind of using my fingers as a squeegee. And I hope you can see right away what a good idea it is to wear gloves when you do this. Because I'm getting a lot of glue in places that make it very difficult to clean it up. And I also talk about, demonstrate a bit about what the different shapes of paper will do. And I tried to kind of demonstrate that, looping around, getting it to stick on its end. And you can see that a little bit. So I know that you guys are absolutely thrilled with that video because it's an excellent video, one of the best I've ever done. But when you do this, to get full credit, remember 3 photos of your work. One before you're done, so like what you already submitted, and then 2 different angles when you're finished. And it's important that you do 2 layers of paper mache. And it's important that you get it as smooth as you possibly can, and that's why you sand it after the first layer and then sand after the second. Now, if you're sanding down after the second layer and you see the foam again, just add layers of paper mache or a piece of paper mache over that, because when you're done with this, it needs to be smooth and all the purple foam must be invisible. And this is again after you've carved your object. Several of you have been communicating back and forth, carving the biomorphic object, saying you need to sand here a little bit more, do that, and people are responding, sanding it and smoothing it out. And I really appreciate that because it needs to be smooth. It shouldn't have any sharp edges, and it needs to have the paper mache all around it so that it's easy to paint and apply material to it. Does that look like something you guys can handle?
Yeah, I was waiting until the meeting tonight to get started in case I was missing anything or would be doing it wrong. That made me much more confident about it. I do have to ask one more thing though. Do we have to like mix up the glue at all, or is it just that stuff in the bag?
What I would recommend, the best way to do this, and I do describe it in the video, is you're going to do about, take out about half the glue and half the flour. And what you're going to do is take your container, fill it up about halfway with water, pour half the glue in that, then pour half the flour in it. And you're just going to knead it with your fingers to get as much of the little lumps out as you possibly can. When you step away from it, you're going to want to put the lid on. But what I would recommend, we used to use a whisk in the class to help whisk it, and you can do that. Just be careful about spatters. Remember, before you start doing this, you cover the tabletop with a plastic garbage bag because it will make a mess. Not much mess if you cover it with a garbage bag. If you don't, it will make a mess. Absolutely, all the time. And if you're going to use a whisk, I would get one from DI so you can throw it away when you're done. But what I found is most effective is I'll go through, spend about 15 minutes getting as much of the bubbles or much of the lumps smushed as I possibly can. Then I'll put the lid on, walk away for a couple hours, come back and start using it. And usually by that time, it's pretty smooth. But as you are applying, you'll put your paper through it, you'll squeegee off the excess, and you're gonna be amazed by how far that amount goes. But we give you enough to do the whole thing. after the first half an hour of applying paper mache strips, you'll notice that there are even fewer lumps. And then when you go back and do the second layer after the first one dries and you sanded it, when you go back into the second layer, it's going to be amazing to you because it'll almost be completely consistent. Almost all the lumps will be gone. So, and I would recommend if you're going to get gloves, which I do recommend, I would get them from like Dollar Tree or something like that. And sometimes the dishwashing gloves work really well, and or latex. I think latex is really good too. So, does that help, Tennis?
Yeah, and you said you go over all of that in the video too, so I can refer to that
Yeah,
later.
talk about it, and it's mile marker 54 is where it starts, and I'm writing that down so I can remember to um, put that into the module, the attendance module. Or give me actually, I'm not going to write it down. I'm going to go right into the attendance module now and fix that. Okay. And today, this was Monday. What day was Monday? Was that the 10th?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to add this in. Let's see. Hold on a second here. Okay. What I wrote is I'm going to put a link to that paper mache demo in the attendance thing. And I just said it paper mache part starts at mile marker 54. So, and then, so after this class, when the recording goes live, you'll be able to see that. Now we have about a half an hour left, and I want to talk about this, and we're going to talk about it again. Are we meeting next Wednesday?
I assumed we were.
Okay, because that's what I'm planning on. I'm planning on meeting next Wednesday, and that's what I want to talk more about the conceptual art stuff. There's some videos that are really important for people to watch that I want you to go through. I want everybody to go through that module, watch all the videos that you see, because there are some really good ones to talk about or to look at. And I found I've been getting into a little bit of trouble where I'll read the requirements for copyright usage, copyright or appropriate copyright usage. And since we do this in a class and in the module, it is clearly referenced. I didn't think I was getting in any trouble, but I found out that I am getting some dings for copyright violations because the individuals whose material I used, even though I followed their description of proper use, they aren't happy with it. And so I have to be really super careful. But so we're not going to watch any of these videos, but I do want to talk in class, but I want you to watch the videos themselves. Let's see. I'm going to now watching this. This is a really good video, and I'm trying to get where it kind of describes what's going on with the contemporary art. And we'll get back to that in just a second. But these artists, these are some interesting design ideas, but we get down here, and these are the artists that I really want you to look at because they talk about their stuff. Now, what separates out conceptual art from the other stuff that we're doing is all the other stuff we've done, we've used tools to make stuff. And you use like knives and rasps and sandpaper to make your carving or your house or whatever. But conceptual artists, remember what Marcel Duchamp really wanted you to think about what you were looking at. And conceptual artists, they use those things that we've made as the tools to sculpt. And what they're sculpting is the ideas in your head, the concepts. So it's a multi-dimensional work. It's not limited to just 3 dimensions, but I think it's really fascinating, exploring this kind of thing. So, getting that kind of idea where the sculptor is actually working with ideas, and that's what they're making. That's the finished product, forcing you to think about something. They're not telling you what to think, but they're creating an environment which makes it almost impossible for you to not engage with whatever the thing is. It's difficult to ignore. Now, if looking at this, Joseph Kosis 1 and 3 chairs, and he did several of these, 1 and 5 clocks. There were different perspectives on time. Just he did a lot of these things where he would show different perspectives of the same thing and ask you to think about it. Now, there's a video that I have people watch. There's a couple of videos. And I think that there's a really good video, which is Plato's Allegory of the Cave. And I really want you to watch that, where that takes you to a Wikipedia link. And let me see if I can find. I'll show you what the video is I want you to watch, and I'll put a link on there, link in to it. And the reason I've got to do it this way is because, again, I can't show you the video because I'll get in trouble. Okay. So this is the video, and it's called Plato's Allegory of the Cave. And I'll put a link into this assignment right now so you can see it. But it's animated, and it talks through the allegory. And we will talk about what that allegory is in just a second here. Let's see. So I'm going to say, and what's the title of that? Plato's Allegory of the Cave. I really like Alex Gendler's work because he has a way of explaining things so that they're relatively easy to understand. And I really appreciate that. And he has a sense of humor that I find engaging as well. Okay, so if we go back to this, what I've included in here is a link, Plato's Allegory of the Cave, Alex Gendler. Watch that, definitely watch that. Now I am going to talk a little bit about what the Allegory of the Cave is. We're going to go to this Wikipedia article. I didn't have a problem with this because the allegory of cave is something that is ubiquitous as far as philosophy goes. I generally don't like referring people to Wikipedia because uh, there's no gatekeeping. Absolutely anybody can get on and change any of the articles. So it's kind of, you don't know how the quality of the information. But this one I did go through and is pretty good. In Plato's work, The Republic, one of the things that he advocates for is the rule of a civilization by people that are governed by both intellect and conscience. And he calls these, priest kings or, philosopher kings. And it's people that understand and know, but are driven also by an intense desire to do the right thing. And so, he's hoping, he's praying that people are going to be moral and smart. And, ideally, that would be a beautiful world to live in, and, for him. But one of the things he talks about is, what makes people that are thinking about stuff, what makes them different than the people that just live their lives to survive. And what he talks about is people are essentially in this scenario that he contrives. He says, imagine if for a moment, if somebody lives their whole life into adulthood, chained in a cave in such a way so that they are forced to look in front of them onto a cave wall. Behind them is a fire, and that fire casts a dim and flickering light. And occasionally, this person chained up will hear sounds and see shadows cast by the fire that he thinks may be associated with those sounds. And he is told over time that these shadows he's seeing are a person, a horse, a tree, and that sound is a child laughing. And that's what he's told. So that's all the reality that he experiences. And then sometimes after he becomes an adult, somebody strikes off his chain and kicks him out of the cave. First thing that happens is complete confusion, and he can't see. He's blinded by the light. But after a while, his eyes adjust, and he's able to go around and actually meet other people and talk to them. And he assumes they're people because they make the same kind of noises and have the same kind of shapes of what he used to know, but he's never seen people before. He's never seen trees. He's never seen grass. He's heard about it. And after a while, he gets to a point where he can see not just the trees, but he can also see the reflections in water. And he can see the sun casting this incredibly bright light. And then after all this, he realizes that the world is so much more vast than what he originally thought. So he goes back to the cave. What do you think the people in the cave do to him? How do you think they treat him when he tries to tell them about all the marvelous things he's seen?
Like, don't believe him.
Exactly. They don't believe him. And they even kick him. They beat him. They try to drive him away. And this is, the parallel is pretty clear. Plato is talking about the death of Socrates, who was forced to commit suicide because he challenged the rights of governance for these career politicians in Athens. And Plato is saying when enlightenment is forced upon the people that refuse the enlightenment, it's going to get bad. But on a different level, what I like about this is I love the idea that Plato is describing through this allegory, this concept that there are going to be different layers of thought, different layers of interaction with things. Another writer I really like is Gene Wolfe, and he talks about symbolism there's always three layers to symbolism. The thing is as it is, the thing as it represents something else, and the thing as part of a broader story. And I think that's fast. Oh, hold on. I'm sorry about that. There's another video that turned on and I had no idea how to stop it. Oh, anyway. Okay, I'm back. So I love that about what Gene Wolfe says, that there's layers to things, and then Plato's allegory of the cave. But the reason why these are important is because it is important to understand there are multiple layers of understanding about things. And so with that background, when we go back and look at Joseph Kossuth's 1 and 3 chairs, one of the things that Plato talks about is this idea that perhaps that there is a world of the real or the world of the ideal, where in that world is the perfect chair. And the reason why when we encounter an object and label it a chair is because subconsciously we're connected to that world of the ideal, and we understand what that perfect chair is, so we compare things automatically to it. And I think that that's a really interesting idea. So in this, if we look at this, we have, what's this object right here in the middle?
It's a chair.
It's a chair. What's this object?
That's a picture of a chair.
Exactly. And then this right here is a dictionary definition of a chair. So from one perspective, all three of these are chairs. But there's only one chair. I mean, this is the only real chair. However, this photo is kind of real too, because from our perspective, we're seeing this real chair as a photo as well. And this is where you start getting into ideas of meta construction. Have you guys ever watch any of the Deadpool movies?
I have not seen any of them.
Okay, have you guys ever watched anything like SpongeBob SquarePants?
I actually haven't seen any SpongeBob stuff.
Oh, you're so poorly educated. Oh,
I think I've seen more SpongeBob than I care to admit.
no, I'm just teasing, Tanis. But what is interesting about those is the creators are specifically engaging the audience with addressing ideas of layers of reality. SpongeBob SquarePants will do things specifically to engage the audience on different layers. Deadpool breaks the fourth wall constantly. And so those kinds of things are interesting because what you're being asked to engage with is the ideas behind the real things. You know, what is real? And I don't think the answer lies in conceptual art. But what makes conceptual art interesting to me is that it is trying to engage those kinds of internal conversations. What is real? What makes things worthwhile? You know, how do you engage with an object? Because when you see this thing, the 1 in 3 chairs, whether or not it's interesting to you, and whether or not you think that it's art, regardless, you're instantly start asking yourself questions. What makes it art? Why is this considered art? Why does somebody else consider this art? When clearly I think it's a waste of time. And I think that all those questions are valid. One of the problems of that people consistently complain about with contemporary society, if they complain about contemporary society, is that people don't value things that are real. And I that is pretty consistent, regardless of the time period. Whenever people are being self-reflective of the time period that they live in, that is one of the concerns people have. And this is true of Protestant ministers in the 17th century as well as today. Jason Lanigan, if you meet him on campus, he found a letter that I thought was just great, which was letter to the editor by a Protestant minister in 17th century American colony who was complaining about how little children respect their elders, and the world is going to hell in a handcart because kids are talking back. They don't listen to directions. And I think it's just hilarious because the same can be said today. But it's that idea of sculpting with people's minds and ideas, building something or placing something or forcing people into a situation where if they choose to, they can encounter new thoughts. I think that kind of stuff is fascinating to me. And so that's what this module is about. And in this module, and again, it matters less to me that you engage with this thinking that it's a real art form. I don't really, what your opinion is matters a little bit less to me than going through the process. And the reason I say that is everybody who's gone through the process, their opinion has expanded. For better or worse, it's changed because it gives you an opportunity to actually think about what's going on. So we have ready-mades in conceptual and art. And a ready-made, again, is an object that somebody else has manufactured. And the purpose of this assignment is to create a new context for the object and then making it mean something new. And and giving a really nice photo to it is really a great way to do this. And I love this kind of dramatic fashion style photo because it really gives the object a very new context. And we'll go over these next week. But the art then becomes not the object itself, but the art becomes, what are you thinking about the object? How are you defining it? What's the title you give it? How are you photographing it? And how do you want people to encounter it? And by changing those kind of contextual connections with the object, this is a very phenomenological thing. But by changing those kinds of connections with the object and transforming the context, we are, even though the molecular structure of the object hasn't changed, we are making it a new thing. And I think it's just fascinating. So, like I said, next week we'll look at what people come up with because it will be fascinating. I love what people are doing already, transforming these kinds of things. But so I want to, for the contemporary processes, there's two specific steps. One is ready-mades, and one is colorful cocoon or wrapped object. And if you're thinking, oh crap, we got to do two things. Well, yes, you've got to do two things, but as you do these two things, they're going to take you a lot less time than the other stuff. And most of the work is in articulating what you're thinking about the object. So the cocoon or wrapped object, this is one of the artists that I really am enamored of is Jean-Claude and Christo. Well, an artist duo. husband and wife. They both died just a couple years ago, but their stuff is pretty astounding. And let's see. I'm trying to find. Okay, no, that's not it. That's not what I'm looking for. So hold on. And I'm gonna go back to this. What I'm gonna do is pull up a couple artists that I want you to look at. The two I want to show you really quick are Judith Scott and Jean-Claude Christo. And you'll probably recognize some of this stuff. The gates, the Arc de Triomphe, the piers in Florida, umbrellas, this kind of stuff. When we look at these kinds of things, what they're doing essentially, floating piers, the islands, what they're doing essentially is covering stuff with plastic or cloth. When you see something covered like this, the Pont Neuf, when you see that covered, when you see any object covered, what is one of the first reactions that you have towards that thing? And I remember when I was a kid, this is one of the things that made festivities exciting, seeing presents wrapped and stuff, because the first thing I wanted to do was unwrap it. I wanted to see what was hidden. And what's really amazing to me is Jean-Claude and Christo, they were very successful in addressing that kind of monkey mind curiosity to engage people. Yeah, maybe you lived with this in your town for years, or you grew up around Central Park, for 40 years, or you drove through this valley every day for decades. By covering it, the response that most people have immediately is, what's underneath it, what's hiding, even if they grew up with the object. And it fundamentally transforms a person's level of engagement with the object that's covered. They become super curious. And Jean-Claude and Christo, a lot of the times they're doing this specifically to get people to engage with the idea that they are in control of their life. And if they've lost that control, they need to gain it back. And very, very powerful artists, and they're dealing quite a bit with the relationship that we have with our environment. Now, Judith Scott, I love her work as well. Her sister did not know that she was alive for a very long time. Because when Judith Scott was, she was deaf, and she had functional developmental disabilities. And her parents were convinced that they were told that they needed to put her into a state institution because that would be the best thing for her and the family. So after the parents died, Judith Scott's sister finds out about her because she had forgotten, about her. She finds out about her, and she realizes she's in a situation to put her sister in to a home where Judith Scott can find her identity. People will care about her, and she can become part of a community. And there is a photo of Judith and her sister meeting her sister for the first time that is just absolutely beautiful. But what Judith Scott started doing when she was in this home was she started building these cocoons. And she would build the cocoons with fabric and yarn that she would find or liberate, which is a nice way of saying steal. And inside these, when people started x-raying them, they found that Judith would go around and find interesting things that either belonged to other people or didn't, and she would put them into these cocoons. And they become almost a metaphor for what Judith herself went through, where her sister found her as almost entirely unresponsive. And by demonstrating love and compassion towards her because she's her sister and putting her into an environment where people actually cared about her, she completely transformed into a new individual. And this is her art. I think they're astounding. I think they're amazing. And so for this particular assignment, what you're being asked to do is to find objects and transform them by significantly altering their silhouette with cocooning. And this is not putting a layer of shrink wrap around something. This is, these are good examples of what people have done. This is Jason Lanigan's work, where he would take sticks, and some of these are covered with electrical tape, some with ribbon, some with packing material, some with cloth. This set right here, he used zip ties with contrasting colors that really made a very interesting object. And then put these different sticks together. And this one, he coated the sticks with electrical tape and then tied them together with yarn. But he's fundamentally transforming these objects. They're no longer just sticks. They become something much more vibrant and interesting. And then these are some examples from this class where people like this, the entire cocoon is made up of objects that have meaning, and they're connected with a little bit of yarn. But the thing that's being cocooned is inside of here, and the whole thing is transformed through the cocooning. It's no longer the same silhouette. And this right here, this started out as a childhood teddy bear. And this person cocooned it with all these objects associated with the process of growing up. So again, fundamentally transforming it. This I thought was really interesting. This person, they wanted to make a cocoon around the idea of living in an apartment. And they thought doing this with the ironing board was great. But this isn't just shrink wrap. What they did is they put a coat of shrink wrap around this, hit it with a blow dryer to get some of it to melt and shrink and change shape. Then they would add different objects in, put other layers on, hit it again. And they did this over and over again. So that even though they started off with shrink wrap, now it started looking like a really kind of scary spider web, kind of cocoonish kind of thing, where it almost looks like these objects are suspended so that the spider can come back and drink their blood, or maybe their eggs or something. But it fundamentally transforms the nature of the object without changing the object itself. So again, we're going to talk about this next week some more, but does all that kind of help give a little bit more background and flavor to what we're doing with the contemporary processes?
Yeah, it does.
So the art that we're generating is not building something, but we are creating a different way of understanding the object by creating new context on one, and then fundamentally changing how somebody's going to interact with the object for the other one. And I think both of those are really interesting things to pursue. What do you think, Tanis? Is this making sense?
Yes.
Okay, excellent, great. All right, well, we are wrapping up right now. Thank you for staying with me, and thank you for dealing with a little bit of technical issues that we had. Any questions?
I do not have any.
All right, any comments?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Well, and I do notice that people are coming out, are submitting stuff in the discussion for the contemporary processes thing. So we will have more stuff to talk about next week. And I want to dive a little bit more into Judith Scott and Jean-Claude and Christo, as well as Marcel Duchamp. And look at those kinds of things and look at what students have made. So that's what we're going to talk about next week. And remember, do the best you can to get those self and peer critiques done. Again, this week I got everything caught up on Monday, and then I was having computer issues yesterday, so I will try to take care of that by the weekend. But if you have any questions, let me know. And I'm really appreciating the fact that so many of you are revisiting assignments and then resubmitting them. So thank you very much. You guys have a wonderful week and weekend.
Thank you. You
I
too.
do actually have one more question. I just remembered.
Oh, okay. Go for it, Tim.
I'm sure you say it in the video, and in the assignment description, but I'd just like to double check. How much time would you say we should plan on for doing this week's paper mache?
I'm thinking that it's going to probably be a few hours. Let's see, and I do have it. Let's see. I'd be really surprised if you, for anybody, I don't think I wrote it down, but in my experience, on average, 2 layers means 2 or 3 hours one day, 2 or 3 hours the next day. And that is pretty consistent. I did not add it in specifically on this, but that 2 to 3 hours, that includes setting up and the paper mache. We're not counting the drying time. And then it may be that that time is maybe about a quarter of it is going to be sanding. So what you'll need to do is address this 3 times. The first time, you're going to make the paper mache, do the first layer. Let that dry, come back, sand it down, and do the second layer. And then the third time, you're going to come back and sand it again. And I'd say about 6 hours is going to be pretty close to what you'll do.
All right, thank you.
Sure thing. All right. Well, you guys have a great week and weekend, and I will look forward to seeing you next Wednesday.
Thank you.